Hey, welcome to Spectral Echoes, a collection of Reddit stories as told by people high as a kite. But it's Reddit, who knows, right? If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories. Now, let's get started.
1. My aunt's old basement, an unnamed memory.
I spent part of my summer in Cornwall, England, staying at my aunt's house when I was about 8 or 9 years old. My parents were away on an extended overseas work trip, and my aunt's home was the most convenient option. She lived alone in a 3-story red brick house with an overgrown garden out back, and beneath the house was a basement she casually referred to as the storage room. At the time, I didn't think much about the basement. It was just a low-ceiling space, brick walls, faintly damp, the kind of smell you expect from old houses. A single round yellow light bulb dangled from the ceiling. It wasn't dark enough to be scary, but it wasn't exactly pleasant either. I would often go down to grab a box of milk or canned beans. Everything seemed ordinary. Nothing at the time raised any real questions. Around the second week, I started noticing little things, so minor I didn't consider them strange. Like the fact that every time I went down the stairs into the basement, I felt a faint current of air on my skin, even though there were no windows or vents. Or that the light always felt uneven, as if one corner, specifically the left, near the wooden cabinet, was just naturally darker despite the bulb working fine. One day, while looking for a jar of blueberry jam, I noticed several pencil marks on the brick wall by the door frame. Tall vertical lines, like someone had been measuring height, 3 marks in total. I stepped closer. The highest one looked recent and matched my height exactly. The 2 below it were shorter. No names, no dates. I touched the lines, still sharp, not yet faded by time. I didn't think too much of it. Maybe my aunt measured someone else's kids. Maybe even me, though I couldn't remember it ever happening. There was only one moment during my stay that I still can't explain. It was on a rainy night. The power had gone out. My aunt handed me a flashlight and asked me to fetch a box of candles from the basement. I took the flashlight and headed down. The beam lit up a thin layer of dust coating the stairs. As I reached the bottom, I heard something very faint, a soft scraping sound like fingernails brushing wood, lasting no more than a second. I stopped. Nothing followed, just silence. I gave a nervous laugh, assuming it was mice, or maybe just the rain echoing strangely. Still, I went back upstairs sooner than usual. Not running, not panicking, just not wanting to be there any longer than necessary. A few days before I left, I went down one last time to grab something. As I knelt to open a box of instant noodles, I noticed a faint, circular mark in the dust, like something had sat there for a very long time, then been removed. Next to it were faint smudges, not shoe prints, not clear. I didn't ask my aunt, not sure why. I never went back down after that. I grew up, moved to London for school and work, and forgot all about that summer. Until one sleepless night, the memory of that basement came back. First the image of the swaying yellow bulb, then the pencil marks, then the quiet sound during the storm, and then something that made me shiver. I remembered being down there once with a small rubber ball. I don't recall why I brought it, maybe just playing by myself. I dropped it. It hit the floor, rolled a bit, and I expected it to strike the far wall, but it didn't. It rolled halfway, then slowly changed direction, turning around, rolling gently back toward me. The basement floor wasn't flat, it sloped slightly to the left. The ball should have rolled toward the darker corner near the cabinet, but it didn't. It came back as if someone had nudged it back. As a child, I giggled and kicked it aside. But years later, lying in bed, that moment floated back with a cold clarity. My aunt later sold the house. She moved in with her daughter in Bristol. I never had a reason to return to Cornwall. But sometimes when I smell damp air or see yellow light against bare brick, I get that odd tug in my chest. Not fear, not nostalgia, just something unfinished. I don't know what was in that basement. Maybe nothing. But what if that day it wasn't the ball rolling back by itself? What if something had caught it and gently pushed it back to me? The thought doesn't terrify me. It arrives like a mist, quiet, almost unnoticed, but it lingers. I recall that faint darkness in the corner, the way silence there felt deeper than silence should. Maybe I imagined it, or maybe memory added things that never happened. Still, if something was there, It didn't mean me harm. It only watched or played. I'll never know what lived in that quiet. But if one day you drop something and it returns to you on its own, pause a second longer, just in case someone in the shadows is handing it back.
2. The tunnel behind the school cafeteria.
Written by me because I just keep feeling like something isn't right. Is this just my brain filling in the blanks, or did something truly weird happen? I'm not sure, and I don't have the guts to find out, so let's just leave it here for now. I once studied at an old boarding school on the outskirts of France, not far from the Swiss border. The school's name sounded fancy, like an old castle or something like that. But in reality, it was just a campus built before the World Wars, supposedly used as a field hospital. At least, that's what people said. It only got a slapdash renovation in the 80s, and I heard they fixed it up again after we graduated. Typical life cycle, huh? The school sat among low pine forests, surrounded by gray stone and red brick walls. On autumn mornings, fog would roll down and cover the stone paths so thick that you couldn't even see the sports field just a few meters away. The kind of fog that filled your lungs with moisture, and if you took a deep breath, you'd end up choking. Damp and uncomfortable as hell. I hated that place. I wasn't used to being far from home, and I definitely wasn't used to those silent breakfasts with hard bread and unsalted butter. I wasn't good at talking in class, and I had no intention of making friends. But somehow, I still ended up tagging along with Josh and Claire that afternoon. Mossy wall. There was something every student knew. No one went behind the cafeteria. No one forbade it. There were no signs, no cameras. People just didn't go there. Behind it was a low wall, partially sunken into the ground, thick with moss, and there was a damp, moldy smell seeping through the old bricks. Thinking back, it was probably just dirty and overgrown, and since no one had a reason to go there, it made sense no one did. Or maybe people did, and I just never knew. Either way, I never went. Josh found a small metal door behind a rusted fence. It wasn't locked, just held shut by a broken plank. Claire said, "If there's anything interesting in this school, it's probably here." Nah, there's nothing cool here, I thought at the time. Honestly, I still think that. I just wanted to go back, lie on my bed, eat snacks, or just do nothing at all. But I didn't say that out loud. I didn't want to be seen as a coward. But I remember clearly, I hesitated. There was something about the low stone stairs leading underground that made me not want to go. I really didn't want to. A vague sense of unease clung to me from the moment I stepped onto the ground behind the cafeteria, as if the air there was thinner, heavier, missing oxygen for no reason. Maybe it really was missing oxygen, since it was narrow and looked like a bunker hatch. I guess no one had opened it in ages. My eyes stung, but I went anyway. Stupid, really. If it were me now, I'd have bolted, no question. The tunnel wasn't deep, just a short staircase and a narrow hallway. The ceiling was so low that Josh had to duck his head. Claire led the way, flashlight in hand, lighting each step. I had to admit, she was really brave. I would never have volunteered to go first. I'm a coward, that's just how it is. There was nothing there, just old gray walls with a few cracked bricks. The floor was damp and slippery. But there was one weird thing. There was no echo. We spoke quietly, joked a bit, but it was like the silence swallowed everything up. I couldn't explain it at the time, and I doubt Claire or Josh could either, but it was clear we all felt something was off. Because after that, none of us said another word. At some point, there was a faint chit sound. Couldn't tell where it was coming from. Like the sound of small claws skittering on metal. All three of us stopped. Probably just a rat. Claire turned, face blank, shining the flashlight toward the sound. Josh seemed like he was laughing. I couldn't see, only heard it, but it was so forced it made me want to cry for him. No one dared to speak. Fear crept in so slowly, like water soaking into dry fabric. And with each step, I kept wishing someone would just say, "Let's go back," but no one did. Fuck. At the end of the hallway was a square room, about 3 meters on each side. There wasn't much in there, just some old student desks and chairs. Pretty ordinary, probably just unused furniture dumped there. Nothing that looked like it was from a hospital or the war, so I figured all those rumors were just bullshit. The strangest thing was probably a single wooden chair placed in the middle. The kind of old school chair with a slightly curved seat, paint peeling off, and burn marks on the legs. On top of it was a piece of paper with messy scribbles, a few smudged marker stains, some numbers, or an unfinished sentence. I wasn't sure. On the floor were a few damp pieces of paper, curling at the edges from moisture. I figured they had just fallen from the desk. That was it. I didn't think much of it. But thinking back now, that basement hadn't been used in forever. So why were the papers wet? Was it the humidity, or was there a leak somewhere? But the floor was otherwise dry. What really struck me was a pencil drawing on one of the papers, a face without a mouth. The lines were messy, almost childlike, but the eyes were shaded so dark. Maybe I was overthinking, but it was genuinely creepy, and I couldn't bring myself to look at it again. But that was enough. I'll never forget it, at least not now, as I'm typing these words. After that, we just turned back, that's it. Even Josh stayed quiet. He wasn't the loudest guy, but he rarely went completely silent like that. I think it wasn't just me who felt relieved once we got out of that tunnel without anything happening. I can't really put it into words. About a year later, I moved away. It wasn't until last June that I saw Claire again, during a class reunion when I had some business back in Lyon. I hadn't planned to go, but since I was nearby, I dropped in. It had been almost 20 years since we'd seen each other, something like that. Claire was working for an old book publishing house, still quiet, still not one to smile much. I suddenly remembered that tunnel. Honestly, there wasn't much else to remember about that place. Do you remember that tunnel behind the cafeteria? Claire looked at me for a moment, then nodded. Wait, was that the room with the old red vending machine in the middle? I stared at her. No, it was desks and chairs, with a wooden chair in the center. Claire frowned, a little puzzled. I remember it being a red vending machine. It still had buttons. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, never mind. I awkwardly changed the subject. A while later, Josh showed up. I forgot what he does now, or maybe I never asked. Claire was the one to bring it up again, like she was still thinking about it after my reaction. But what happened next was even weirder. Josh, who was already a bit buzzed from a few beers, but still very certain, said, "That room had those plastic dolls hanging, like a display. Don't you remember? Dolls. A vending machine? A wooden school chair?" None of us remembered it the same way. But the weirdest part was, each of us was absolutely sure about what we saw. I started to wonder if there was something wrong with my memory. Or maybe each of us had seen something different. Or maybe that space never stayed the same at all. Forget it, I don't want to think about it anymore, because honestly, nothing happened in the end. That night, I lay in my hotel room with the lights dimmed, staring at the ceiling for hours. The longer I stared, the more I felt the urge to write this down. So I started to remember the feeling I had when I stepped into that room. The more I remembered, the less I could remember the chair, or even that creepy drawing. It was just the feeling of being watched. I didn't know from where, or by whom. I wanted to believe I was imagining it. But then I started to think, if all three of us remembered it wrong, then maybe none of us ever remembered it right. Or worse, what if the memory I've been holding on to all these years was never mine to begin with? Maybe I never even stepped into that room. Maybe I just heard someone else's story and unconsciously built it all up in my head. Maybe I made this whole thing up from start to finish, just to fill in the blank of a day I simply don't remember. Whenever I think about that, I get chills. Not because I'm afraid of something in the past, but because I'm not sure if that past ever truly existed.
3. The abandoned tunnel in the Oregon woods.
I was 24 years old enough to think I knew what was real and what was imaginary, old enough to believe I had everything under control, old enough to think I wouldn't be afraid of anything anymore. But no, I was wrong, or maybe I wasn't as brave as I thought. The day was overcast. The Oregon rain was persistent like mist, seeping into my hair and clothes, and the smell of rotting leaves and damp earth clung to my every breath. I went hiking with 2 friends, just to escape the stuffy dorm room. We were just going for a walk, really just going for a walk. But then we found the tunnel. It was behind a curtain of vines and brambles, hidden by the dark trunks of old pines. I remember the sound of a branch snapping under Marcus's feet, along with a curse. Perhaps he had cut his leg. Then Kyle called softly, "Hey, look." The cracked, moss-covered concrete tunnel appeared in the direction Kyle was pointing. I looked inside. It was so dark that you couldn't see more than 2-3 m from the outside, like a cave with its mouth gaping to swallow the light. The 2 old railway tracks were still there, filled with stagnant water and rotten leaves. "Do you think we should go in?" I don't remember who said it, but I certainly wasn't the one who suggested it. We stood there, silent, staring into the darkness, waiting. Damn it, what crazy idea of exploration had led me here? Damn it, you're in your 20s, not your teens with this silly exploration. However, at that time, it seemed normal to us just to walk. And I, stupidly, was the first one to step in. The air changed immediately. It was colder, damper, and the smell of rust and mold was so thick I could taste the metal on my tongue. The flashlight swept across the walls, revealing graffiti, names, years, curses, distorted shapes. I remember laughing with the two guys next to me about looking at the idiots who had been here or something. Until one wall, all red arrows. A bright red that stood out so much, it stabbed the eyes of the person looking at them. Dozens of red arrows, bold and blurred, all pointing forward, deeper into the darkness. We followed. Kyle still joked, Marcus still sneered, but each sentence felt like a stone thrown into a black lake. No echo, no ripple, just gone. I thought it was the tunnel design, but anyway, we fell silent. I began to notice long scratches on the concrete walls, as if someone had dragged something sharp down the hallway. In some places, chunks of brick had come off, revealing rough, gray concrete. I saw a small handprint on the wall, a dark handprint, the size of a child's. I didn't dare ask the other two if they had seen it. Honestly, the thought of children playing in here was normal, but I had more than that, you know, right? So I pretended not to see anything, and kept moving as usual. Going deeper, the flashlight beam swept across the painted smiley faces, the scribbles, the mouths curled up but the eyes were completely blacked out. The only thing I could hear was the steady drip of water somewhere, like an old clock counting down. Of course I kept reassuring myself that it was just water. But to be honest, I was already feeling creepy. I looked down at the floor, saw torn pieces of paper, smudged writing, a few numbers, a few lines of unclear English. Marcus bent down to pick up one, glanced at it, then threw it back down, saying nothing. Kyle glanced at me, the flashlight beam gliding across his pale face. We saw a small room on the side of the tunnel, the wooden door half collapsed, rotten. Inside there was nothing but a few boxes piled in the corner of the room. However, there were traces of incandescent bulbs on the ceiling and many traces on the walls as if something had been leaning against it for a long time, recently moved. Besides, as I noticed, this place was very clean, as if, has anyone lived here before? Kyle asked softly. Marcus and I swallowed. Obviously, in my heart I had thought of a worse situation. Is someone still living here? We began to hear a strange noise behind us. Slow, steady, and indescribable. At first it sounded like wind, then like metal hitting wood or something, then a soft whistling sound. Marcus turned around, shining his flashlight. No one was there. Kyle muttered, "It must be just an echo." But we both knew there was no echo in this tunnel. We hadn't made any sound at all. The strange noise continued. My chest began to feel heavy, and each breath smelled of mold and panic. I began to regret it. We had put ourselves in this position. No one had forced us into the tunnel. No one had made us go deeper. We had chosen. Oh my God, and we started running. We turned around quickly, almost jumping over each other to run. Fortunately, everything was the same, not as terrifying as what happened in horror movies, thank God. We followed the walls and returned to where we started. The strange sounds were no longer present, making our hearts calm down. Until the flashlight accidentally shone on the floor. Footprints. Dozens of mixed footprints, facing the wall, facing us, facing the empty space. Footprints identical to ours, the same size, the same shape, but there were too many, messy, covered in mud and water. Kyle stood still, trembling. Marcus reached out to lightly touch the wall, pulled his hand back. On it was a slimy black streak with a strong metallic smell. "Do you see anything?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "I don't know." I whispered, my chest aching. I didn't want to stay there another second. When the faint light of the forest appeared at the mouth of the tunnel, I thought I would cry, even though there was nothing. We walked out, no one said a word. No one dared to look at each other. The forest was still green, still moist, but the air outside was cold in a different way, as if the world had changed while we were trapped in the dark. We never spoke of it again. No one asked, no one told, no one dared to dream about it. I tried to forget. I tried to push away the image of the arrows, the footprints, the feeling of something following me in the pitch black. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake up, cold sweat on my back, the smell of rust, the smell of mold swirling around me. I could still hear the slow sound, matching the beat of my heart.
4M's basement. I was 7 or maybe 8 years old. The age when people still believed in Santa Claus, were still afraid of monsters under the bed, but also the age when they were curious and wanted to open every forbidden door, just to see what was inside. It was pretty stupid in retrospect, but what could I do? I was like that at the time. My family didn't have a basement. There were no relatives or neighbors close enough to let me go down and explore their basements. So I didn't know what a basement really looked like until I went to M's house. His house was on the corner. The pale yellow paint was peeling in small patches. The roof was gray and the white window frames were a little off-center. The front yard had a few weeds growing between the paving stones, and the old oak tree across the street was full of fallen leaves. We played in this tree many times, but unfortunately, not long after, it was struck by lightning and had to be cut down. I'm off topic, back to the main topic. In general, in that small town full of the smell of rain and damp soil, MS house looked like any other house, except for the heavy wooden door next to the kitchen. I'm not sure if it was strange, but I'd never seen a door that thick, and when I pulled it open it made a long, scary screeching sound. Don't go down to the basement, it's dangerous. His mother told us over and over again. And when I said it several times, that must have been 4 to 5 times, even though she was only sitting with us for a few minutes before she had to go do something of her own. She always seemed busy and had something to do. I've forgotten the woman's face, but I still remember her slightly worried expression and quick glance towards the basement door when she spoke. I probably wouldn't have remembered anything if M hadn't acted rather strangely afterwards. This puzzled me forever. Anyway, M never answered when I asked why. He just shrugged, then looked away. Asterisk. It was an autumn afternoon. I remember the pale gray sky and the red and yellow leaves flying in the wind. I went over to M's house after school, my pocket still holding a few new cards I had bought to show M. We sat on the living room floor, building Legos, laughing, occasionally looking out the window as the wind blew the leaves up and away. The sound of pots and pans in the kitchen, the faint smell of stewed meat and toast. I remember every little peaceful detail. I don't know why. Maybe sometimes the ordinary moments are more memorable than the special days. I'm pretty sure I remember correctly, but maybe my mind added it, who knows. And then I heard a noise. Clang. It wasn't loud, but it was enough for me to look up. It came from the basement. At first, I thought it was the old washing machine shaking, or someone in the house moving something. But the sound was uneven, not the rumble of an engine, but a soft thump, a pause, then a slow, patient, like footsteps groping across an old wooden floor. I looked at M, intending to ask, but he was building Lego. His hands paused for a moment, then continued, not looking up, not saying a word. Asterisk. I turned away, trying to focus on the Lego in my hand, but my ears were still straining to listen. Click, click. Stop. Click, click. Stop completely. A faint musty smell wafted into the air, mixed with the smell of toast and stew, creating a strange smell, making me shiver slightly without knowing why. The wind whistled through the cracks in the window, the curtains fluttered slightly, the late afternoon sunlight receded, leaving long streaks of light on the wooden floor. I felt the room become strangely quiet. All sounds seemed to be sucked into an invisible void. That night, my mother came to pick me up when it started to drizzle outside. I put on my coat and walked past the basement door. As I passed, I heard a very light creaking sound, like the sound of old wooden stairs giving way under the weight of a footstep. Or maybe it was just the wind blowing through the crack in the door. I looked back, but the door was still closed. The handle shook slightly and then stood still. My mother took my hand, pulled it gently, and I walked out the door. Asterisk. The next day M didn't come to school. The day after that, neither. No one said anything clearly, only heard the adults say briefly. MS family moved. They left on a certain day, no one saw them off, no one said goodbye, it was just that morning. The house was quieter than usual, the curtains were closed. His little sister's bicycle, which was usually left on the porch, was also gone. Only faint tire marks remained on the yard. I stood outside the gate, looking at the silent house, the windows covered in steam, unable to stop imagining the wooden basement door behind the kitchen wall and the noises that day. Many years later, I returned to the old street. The sky was drizzling, the leaves were falling yellow and wet on the sidewalk. The house had a new owner, the walls were repainted. The front yard had purple flowers, lavender bushes, and some hanging baskets swaying in the wind. I stood outside the gate for a long time, my eyes looking inside, feeling strange. I was about to knock on the door just to ask to see the basement again, to verify that the rattling sound that day was just the washing machine shaking, or the wind hitting the door, or something straying into the house. But then I gave up, because the incident happened so many years ago. Even if I went back, I wouldn't be sure what the result would be. Or, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what happened. I didn't have the courage. Bonus. I think this story will disappoint everyone. There's nothing unusual. Maybe I imagined everything. It's just the sound of an old washing machine and the imagination of a 7-year-old boy wanting to believe in strange things. It's simply because M moved away so quickly and without saying goodbye. That's why I'm so curious and unwilling. But maybe something happened in that basement and no one ever told. Anyway, I never got in touch with M again, and everything is just a question mark hanging in my memory. Thanks for reading. Update. Some of you have asked about M's father. To be honest, I have seen him a few times, but that's it. He seems to be a typical man, rough, quiet, and somewhat fierce-looking. Honestly, most of my crazy thoughts about the basement are related to him, and, to be honest, I have a hard time getting this thought out of my head. Others have asked why I didn't try to go into the basement when they moved out, but waited until later, when the place had a new owner. Well, I have to admit that I didn't dare. I was curious about the place, but at the same time, I wasn't that curious. Besides, I didn't have a group of impulsive friends who could organize a house-hopping expedition or something like that. Obviously, M was pretty much my only friend when I was a kid. I'm not sure if my obsession with the basement was due to fear or a sense of loss for M, who left without saying goodbye. I later tried searching for M on social media, but to no avail. Maybe, just maybe, this is good news. Good for both me and him. God bless us. Last update. You ask why I didn't call the police? God, put yourself in the police's shoes. Would they believe a 7 to 8-year-old calling because his friend moved away with his parents without saying hello? Or was it because of the sound he wasn't sure what it was, coming from a place he wasn't sure where? It took a smart guy to figure it out.
But it's Reddit,
Okay
who knows,
then.
right? If you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on these awesome horror stories.